Personally, I really believe in working with restrictions as an artist. They might be either imposed from the outside, or you consciously choose a restriction yourself, or you combine them. But I think the worst which can happen that you have those restrictions and you use them as an excuse to not be creative or to not express yourself. So outer restrictions possibly can be that, for example, you don't have the space for a studio, and so you can't do big paintings, but you get so hung up on it that you don't paint at all. My mom actually told me that Klee, the painter Klee, that he only had small formats because he didn't have a studio. And that's what he then got known for. So that's an example for working with a restriction. Then obviously often many artists maybe might not have the funds to do certain things, and then the question really, instead of getting hung up on that, becomes how you could do this with no budget. I, for example, have created so many theater shows with hardly any budget at all, and I somehow always found a way. And it can be very exciting if you, instead of seeing that as a stumbling block, if you really take it and run with it and become curious and ask yourself, how can I do this without having any funding? Because that's what happened to me in the past, that I didn't get funding, for example, for a show, and I had to find very creative ways to still make it happen because I wanted to make it happen. And yes, so I went down routes that I might have not gone down would I have had a big budget. So, and then, some of us are dealing with chronic illness, and that is a huge restriction. It might be very isolating. You might be sitting there and saying, okay, I can't. It's too draining for me to sit in front of the computer and write a blog. I love writing, and I'm also on my own. I'm not inspired by other creatives, so I can't do anything. And that can be, that can make it even more depressing. And I think what's so hard about that one, that somehow then the personality as an ill person becomes bigger than the artist. And I think, especially in those circumstances, it's important to turn it around and say, first and foremost, I'm an artist, no matter what else is going on. And so if you can't write a blog anymore, what else can you do? Can you write a haiku? Can you take your phone and just record your voice and just say, every day I do 1 minute where I just let my thoughts run, and that's it. And I do that for 100 days. I think it's really kind of reframing those restrictions we are having and see what we can do within that, instead of just being so bogged down that we don't show up anymore. And there's always a reason why we can't be creative. And in my experience, this waiting until you feel better to do something again doesn't work. It's actually the other way around. Every time I overcome this feeling and do something instead, I feel better. And I also feel like proud of myself because I leaned back into my art and expressing myself. So I think instead of seeing these restrictions as an obstacle, we need to run with them. And I remember that, and some artists like that, there's this artist I really loved, and her name is Una. And she was a painter and a performance artist, still is, but she had a phase where she only was doing everything in red. It was very exciting. Fantastic work, really. And she was wearing only red. I used to do one course with her years ago in Austria. Yeah, I think she is Austrian. And for years, I don't know how many years she was doing that. She was only wearing red. She was only creating things in red, whether it was, as I said, performance art or beautiful paintings. And the depth she had with the different reds was just astonishing. And after a while, she stopped with just doing red. She went on to other things, but she at least did it for several years. Yes, and it was fascinating. And yes, look her up if you want to see it as an example. So I think the funny thing is when we give ourselves a restriction consciously or work with the restriction we have, and I give you an example in a minute how those can be combined sometimes, then you can find out things and become creative in very specific ways you wouldn't have been otherwise. Yes, so for me, for example, I developed my technique of drawing because I don't have a studio. I don't have the space to do big paintings and be messy. And that's how I started with my drawings. And the pens I'm using, because they are not messy, I can do it anywhere. I work in A4 or A3 format, and it's very easy for me to do, no matter where I am. And I just don't think about big formats anymore. And if things change in my life again, I can rethink. But so far, now I'm honing into this one and see what appears on my paper. And if you're curious about my art, I have a lot of art prints and whatnot on Fine Art America. I drop a link. So I just want to really encourage you to run with the restrictions, either the ones which are imposed on you through circumstances, or consciously choosing one or combining the two. Let me know what kind of restrictions you're working with. I would love to hear. This is Anja Kersten. I work with hiding artists and creative entrepreneurs. Bye-bye.